gotta get out of this town.
Yeah, and go where? Where are we gonna go?
I'll tell you where. Someplace warm. A place where the beer flows like wine. Where beautiful women instinctively flock like the salmon of Capistrano. I'm talking about a little place called Aspen.
I don't know, Lloyd. The French are assholes.
All right, welcome to another week of Muskies on Tap. Welcome back, everyone. Just want to say thank you to all our listeners. We're still getting amazing feedback, and it's really good to hear from everybody. And this week we got something really exciting. It's our first ever guest, and that is Justin Reynolds with R&M Musky Shop. If you don't know about R&M Musky Shop, it's in Eagle River on Highway 70. I know Justin will talk more about it, but definitely advise stopping in if you're in the area for bait or anything like that to get your needs to go muskie hunting. So we're really excited to have Justin on this week, and that'll be a nice segment to have. But before I get any further, I'd like to introduce the other co-host tonight on Muskies on Tap. And that first one is sitting right next to me, and that is Max Manti.
What's going on, everybody? Yeah, excited to be up in the Northwoods again. Got to do a little bit of fishing the past few days. And guys, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh.
I like smallmouth fishing.
Oh, whoa. Isn't this called Muskies on Tap?
I needed to get it off my chest. I like smallmouth fishing. I don't know how else to say it. We've had a blast the last few days. Getting on some awesome smallmouth that we'll chat about here in a minute. But yeah, glad to be here again tonight. I think we're actually living up to our name tonight. We have a few Wisconsin Ambers that we've cracked, and should be in for a nice little evening here.
Yeah, this is a solid beer that we really like. Wisconsin Amber, Capital Cities Brewery. Super solid. All right. So we'd also like to introduce the other co-host tonight, and that is Brian Eckel. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing just dandy tonight, guys. I'm kind of the party pooper. I am once again drinking water. If I had a Wisconsin Amber, I would definitely crack it open. A great beer. But yeah, excited to hear about your smallmouth adventure. A little bit jealous of that. Sounded like you guys put a beat down on them. So let's get into some of that action.
Basically, Max and I kind of went out and wanted to go after some big smallmouth because, I mean, we're not much of walleye guys here, and obviously we're really diehard muskie fishermen. So, but what we can do before then is go after these really giant pre-spawn smallmouth, and that's what we did. We kind of went to I wouldn't call it a new body of water, but we've never had success on it pretty much. And it was pretty windy the day we fished, and Max and I we're just mapping out areas. I think we caught them in just 3 areas, and those are all 3 brand new areas, and which is really cool to see. And I think we got a couple quick pointers for you guys, and if you do want to go smallmouth fishing.
Yeah, we can definitely do our best. I mean, we're by no means we're pros at it, but we got onto a pretty cool bite last few days, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I kind of get it, I think when you get tied up into the muskie world, it feels like it's really the only fish that you want to target and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a really fun bite the last few days, and it's I guess it's a nice change of pace to actually fish for a fish that wants to eat pretty consistently and not once or twice a day. So that was great. Getting the rod bent quite a bit the last few days. So yeah, we can dive into quick on kind of where we found them and what we were doing.
Yeah, first off, we talk a little bit about water temps. We're seeing some pretty high range of temps going on because of all the wind we're finally getting up here. And I think we saw anywhere from 49 to 58 on just one single body of water. It seemed like the wind was actually starting to push the warm water into the wind-blown shorelines. We're getting all the warm water, and the calm shorelines were actually colder, even though it was warm and sunny.
Brian, you'll get a kick out of this. I actually got Gus to fish some shorelines finally.
Ah,
Jeez. Sure, you're pulling hair.
Yeah, you know me.
Over there.
Love that off structure.
Yeah, we were fishing. We were fishing rocks. We were fishing some down timber. It was fun. Could actually see the shoreline when we were casting. It was a nice change of pace.
You must have seen them going aerial out of the water along the shore if he was willing to go up tight.
I will say this, one of the crazy things. So the body of water we were fishing was relatively clear water, and we would kind of, like Gus said, we don't have much experience on this particular lake, and so when we were kind of going into these spots, a lot of times we would kind of accidentally run up on the spot. I think at the beginning we were making that mistake more times than not, and it was nuts. Like we would kind of run up on the spot, and all of a sudden, like you'd see 4, 5, 6 just giant smallmouths kind of scatter and move, and you're like, oh shit, like that was it. That was our pod to fish. But I think when we started actually catching them, we got a little bit more dialed in on where they were sitting. So then if we kind of, recognized a place that they potentially would be at, we would cut motor, put the trolling motor and just kind of wind drift into the spot and start bomb casting. And a lot of times the fish were actually coming in the first 10, 15 feet of our retrieve, where, you just hucked it out there literally as far as you could. And, that seems to be where most of the action came.
These fish were kind of moving in packs along the shore, and were they just cruising up and down it, or were they kind of finding their home for spawning?
I think they're getting close. I mean, the areas we did kind of visually, since the water was clear enough, you could see beds, but we didn't see a single fish on a bed. Every time we saw a fish, it was cruising, and usually they were in small packs. I mean, there's one where we were wind drifting sideways, and then I spot locked because I think I got a bite or something like that, and I missed it. And the boat swung, and then I looked on side image, and I saw 9 shadows on the one side, just swimming past the boat. I'm like, dude, there's a school on the other side. And I think that was the second to last fish we got that day, and I just pitched a swim jig out there and and got one. And I think that was the biggest. That's another thing we didn't touch on, is that none of the fish were small. I think the smallest fish was 18 inches, and each Max and I caught a 21 incher. We do not have a scale, but I don't want to talk too many numbers, but they were getting to that 6-pound range. They were giant.
Was there a clear biggest fish of the day, or were they all pretty much around that 20-inch mark?
The 2 21 inchers looked way bigger than just even a fish that was 20 or 19 and a half that we got. It's insane how much bigger and taller they get, almost just with that 1 inch of length, and their tails are just ginormous. I mean, you set the hook and when it's the big one, and it's just staying down, just like a big muskie.
Yeah, it was fun. We, it was mostly big smallmouth, but we got on a mixed bag of stuff. I mean, we caught some nice pike. I had a pike that kind of hit like a muskie, so that kind of got me going for opener. It was a 30, probably low 30s inch pike.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working a little swim jig, and it came up boat side, charged it, tried to swipe at it once, turned around, came back, and just smoked it both sides. It was pretty cool.
That's sweet.
Got a really nice walleye today, 21 inches. We were kind of joking because it came out of a pot of smallmouth that it was just a walleye that identified as a smallmouth, which is it's cool now, but kind of felt that was weird. I mean, I've never had a walleye fight that hard. It felt like a smallmouth up until we saw it, so that was cool. But yeah, just fun to go out and fish, get back out in the water. It was a nice day. It was 70, good wind. Just felt great to be back out there.
So yeah, that was a great time. I think another maybe one last takeaway before we move on was we seemed to get most of our luck on anything that was windy, whether that be walleye or smallmouth. They always kind of related to that wind. I think we got a few, but very minimal on the calm areas. But the wind seemed to be a good factor if you're fishing clear water, to kind of be a little bit more stealthy when you're approaching a spot or something like that. So it seemed like it proved for a few extra bites since we were fishing the wind.
How jealous are you right now, Brian?
A little bit jealous. That is probably my second favorite freshwater fish to catch is smallmouth. I don't know if I've caught a 21 incher, but I believe you when you say it fought like a muskie. Those things have a little bit more piss and vinegar in them.
Well, I mean, what kind of gear are we using? I mean,
We are running medium light rods, mainly like 2000 size reels, 10-pound nano braid, and 12-pound test fluorocarbon leaders, all tied directly by knots to directly the lure. So a lot of feel, and they're putting a huge bend in that rod. I mean, they're folding that thing over.
Surprised that pike didn't snap the line.
Corner hooked them.
you,
We got lucky.
you know how I do
Pro
it.
hook set. Yeah, I forgot.
All right. Well, I think it's time to introduce our first guest here. I can let Gus kind of give you guys the full debrief. But this gentleman set up a tournament this summer, the PMCC Pro Musky Chain Challenge that he's gonna touch on a little bit. That's a tournament that Brian and I are actually fishing in without Gus. We'll be fishing out of the Ranger, the small Ranger.
Pro
It'll
staffers.
be on the chain. So we'll have limited tech, which shouldn't be an issue on the chain. I think the biggest issue will be, just getting out of the tournament with both of us being alive, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to that. I think it's safe to say there'll be plenty of weeds ripped off the bottom of the lake after those 2 days, and hopefully a lot of fish ripped up into the boat.
Yeah, I hope you guys do really well. Unfortunately, I got 2 guide trips that day before the tournament details came out, but that is all right.
Gus is typically the one that kind of keeps the peace in the boat between Brian and I. So without him in the equation, it's really who knows how it's gonna go.
Someone's going in the water. I know it. I'm getting that phone call that day.
Yeah, I don't know if I like how you
But,
use the trolling motor, so we'll have to figure that out. I might have to take the reins for a bit.
Yeah, here, let's just take off the Trova I got, and I'll put it on for you guys, and I'll just say, no to that on my trip.
Yeah, that's gonna be hilarious. I mean, we typically defer to Gus on most things when we musky fish, spots. He's usually doing the boat control, everything like that. Recommending lures and whatnot. So, yeah, Brian and I will be on our own, and really looking forward to that weekend. That's gonna be a lot of fun. You feel the same way, Brian?
No, I can't wait. It's gonna be special holding that big check at the end of it.
I want one of those like pro golf Happy Gilmore size checks, even if we come in
Yeah.
8th place, and he's like, I'll just give me one of them big checks.
We'll have to pitch that idea to Justin here in a few minutes when he gets on.
Right. Yeah. Even if it's like a check for like $700.
Giant. That's all that matters.
Yeah. I'd frame it.
All right, so let's dial up the conversation we're about to have with Justin. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, guys, we got Justin on the line, owner of R&M Musky Shop, Bait and Tackle. How are you doing tonight, Justin?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing swell.
Couldn't be better.
Awesome. You are our first guest on Muskies on Tap. How do you feel?
Now that we got everything hammered out here, I'm feeling good.
Awesome. Yeah, because so we have a couple questions to go over here that we'd like to hear from you. And
Okay.
I guess the first one, I can just dive right into it, is how did you come to own R&M Muskie Shop?
I've worked at bait shops since I was 14 years old and was tired of working for someone else. So this R&M's been for sale for quite a few years, and finally talked the guy into selling it to me. So I was at the time when I bought this, I was working down the road from here, and I don't think they were ecstatic about it, but we worked together pretty good, and that's it. I've learned a lot of things to not do owning your own shop. More things than not to do at these other places than things to do. No.
Right. And what year was that you got ownership?
Actually, we've had this for 3 years. Just a couple days ago.
Oh,
it's
sweet.
been three years. Yeah.
So with that, you guys have a pretty cool tournament coming up in June, the PMCC.
Yeah, the PMCC. Everybody knows the PMTT is not coming to Eagle River and Three Lakes anymore. So, we didn't want to make anybody mad about it, but as far as like the weekends here at the shop, the PMTT is usually a big weekend for us. We have a lot of people in here that weekend. We do a lot of business that weekend. It's nice to see everybody that weekend, and so to lose a tournament like that was like for us, we were kind of like, wow, that's a big hit for us, so we immediately started coming up with a different name and kind of the same format and everything is the PMTT, but we just have a different name.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're excited. I'm fishing in it with our other buddy Brian, our other guy who does this podcast with us, and we can't wait. It's going to be a fun time. I'm really glad you guys were able to replace that, because I know we were pretty, we're obviously weren't super bummed or anything, but when the PMTT is going to Madison, we're excited for that. But as you said, it's such a big weekend for the Eagle River area, and obviously it's great. So how's it been going so far? The process of kind of starting your own tournament, getting people to sign up, how's that been?
We've had some of those fall tournaments in the past couple of years, and they've been smaller, where we've had 30, 40, 50 boats. This is there's a lot more into this one because it's a lot more money, and everything is more expensive, and it's been fun. I got 2 more entries in the mail today, so it's kind of like Christmas, opening up the mailbox every day, because I really do hope that we can fill it the first year. That would be pretty awesome if we could pay, because it's going to pay 30 grand for first place if we fill it up. So everyone that comes in helps at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can't wait. It's going to be a really fun weekend. I think the turnout's going to just, keep getting increasingly more and more here, over the next few weeks once the muskie season kind of gets going and people are up in the area. So, I'm expecting a good field. I like that it's on the Eagle River chain and the Three Lakes chain, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so on Saturday, you'll be allowed to change what side of the chain you're on. So if you start out in Three Lakes and you're not doing any good and you want to come to Eagle River, you'll be allowed to change once through the day. And then on Sunday, you pick your spot and you stay there.
Gotcha.
So Sunday you cannot switch. Saturday you can.
So with the switch, when you say that you're only allowed one switch, does that mean they have to do a call in to maybe you or somebody specific?
Yep. If you're gonna, that's all we're asking is if you're gonna switch, give us a call when you're pulling out, and then give us a call when you're launching, and let us know where you're launching.
Cool.
On the other
and
chain,
then and then maybe some other things to get people to sign up, and where can they do that, or how can they find a good way to get a form?
We've got forms all over town right now. You can sign up right here at the shop. Otherwise, if you email us or private message us on Facebook or Instagram, and that we'll email it. Just send us something with your email address, and we'll get you an entry that day. I actually right before I was getting on with you, I just sent out 3 more of those. So we've got a lot of entries out there right now. That are a lot of that I've sent out that haven't come back. So we'll see. But yeah, you can call us here and at the shop. You can email us, private message us, however you'd like, and we'll get you an entry form.
Awesome. Well, I won't hold you to this, but what's your prediction as far as what's going to get it done for that 30K? What do you think?
Everybody seems to think that it's going to be 10 because we're allowing people to have a live scope. That's not what's going to happen. I'll bet you it's going to be 4 or 5 fish takes it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we were in that PMTT last year, and we didn't catch a single fish on the first day. Luckily enough, we were able to get a few on the second, but I remember Gus's face after we got the update from Tim when we checked on Facebook that a team had caught like 8 fish or something like that.
Yeah. That happened in a spring classic years ago too. Somebody got 8 fish the first day. And
Wow.
it's that was quite a few years ago, probably 10 years ago. But yeah, that takes the wind right out of your sail.
I mean, for anyone that's listening that hasn't fished the Eagle River Three Lakes area, I mean, it's an awesome fishery, and it really is a fishery. You can light it up pretty good if you kind of find the right biter, even a hot bait for the day. Like things can get steamrolling pretty quickly out there. It can get really fun. I mean, there's just so many fish, so it should be interesting to see how it all shakes out, because that's a good time of year, and it'll be interesting to see where they'll be at.
Yeah, it's that and the size limit for the tournament's 30 instead of 34 like the Spring Classic. So that, I mean, the 34 is not a big deal, but when you lower it down, you obviously get more fish caught. So
right.
But yeah, I'll bet you there'll be a lot of fish. I mean, the PMTT set, I don't know how many records up here of total fish. You know, it seemed like every other year they were setting a new record for, 70 fish, 80 fish, 90 fish in a tournament, so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you never know. If the bite's on, it could easily go to a 70, 80, 90 fish tournament,
That'd be awesome.
I hope so, yeah. Those shootouts for muskies are fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. All right. Well, Gus, do you have any more questions about the tournament, or do you want to get into some more bait shop talk?
I think that's it. I mean, if you already kind of talked about that the rules are going to be super similar to the PMTT, that should be pretty straightforward, 30-inch minimum. I think probably the only big one is just that you're allowing just one live scope per boat. That's probably the one big one.
The one live scope per boat. And then we did add here just a few weeks ago that every fish that you catch has got to be measured the same way on your bump board. There were some people questioning that in previous tournaments, that you could catch a fish and measure it one way and then flip it over and measure it again, and so that eliminates that. Every fish has got to be measured the same. So like when we do the rules meeting on Friday, we'll just have a bump board out there, and like a replica of a fish just to show everybody, like, if your pictures don't come in like this, it'll be that simple too. Cause like you said, if there's 90 fish caught in a tournament, we're getting calls and texts and everything nonstop all day. We're just not going to screw around with anything. If you don't do it right, like we've asked you to, your fish just won't count. There just won't be any, no arguing, no nothing. I mean, like, everything will be explained, and we'll do everything we can to help you, but I mean, it'll be crystal clear what everybody's needs to do just to make it easier on us,
Yeah,
sure.
Fair enough.
That's totally fair. Maybe just quick for some of the listeners and going in tournament is the launch sites on the Eagle River chain and the Three Lakes chain. Where would those be?
Yeah, so the Eagle River chain, I have to call Pine Island down on the Three Lakes chain. I'm hoping we can take off out of Pine Island and get that set up. But Eagle River chain, the takeoff will be at Eagle Lake Park for sure. I gotta firm that up with Three Lakes yet. I was gonna do it somewhere else down there, but they wanted to charge us to use their dock to take off in the morning. So we're not doing that. So I'm gonna get a hold of Pine Isle, and I hope that's where we're gonna take off. If not, I'll figure out something, and we'll have something hammered out before the 23rd for sure, so everybody knows where to go on Three Lakes.
All right, awesome. Well, the PMCC, exciting stuff. Go check it out. Like you said, more people we can get to sign up, bigger that pot grows. So
yeah,
hopefully we can get a full field. Get the town buzzing for that weekend. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So outside of being a tournament aficionado and a bait shop owner, I know you're an angler yourself. So I think we teed up this question, but do you have a big fish story from the Northwoods that you'd want to share? Whether you caught it yourself or you're in the boat, something of that nature.
Well, the biggest fish ever in my boat was a good story. I had that one's on the wall here. Well, the replica's on the wall here at the shop. That was my brother's fish. That was a 51 3/4, and it had a little over 27-inch girth. That was the biggest fish that's ever been in my boat. And I'm pretty sure I had that fish on the week before on a sucker, and it was in like 25 feet of water. And I had it on for probably 10, 15 seconds, but you could tell it was big. We never did get to see it, and the sucker popped off. And then the next weekend we went back there, and at the end of the day, and that was literally the last cast. I was telling my brother I'm going to pull the trolling motor and we were going to leave. And I just started pulling the trolling motor up, and he yelled, "I got one!" And I didn't even pull the trolling motor the rest of the way up. I just dropped it, and it fell back in. And he had that fish on, and it ran to the front of the boat and got tangled up in the trolling motor because I didn't pull it all the way up. So I just happened to scoop down, and that thing was all tangled up in the trolling motor. I scooped down, and I happened to come up with it. So, but yeah, that was the biggest fish ever in my boat. And that was,
awesome.
I think that was November 9th or something like that. And the lake that we were on completely iced over the next day. So
that's awesome.
Unreal.
Yeah.
I know
cast.
Yeah, that's legitimately last cast of the season.
Yeah.
And you stick a fish like that. I know I can relate to you, man. Gus has stuck big fish, right after me. Either I'll bring them up and then Gus will stick them, or I'll miss them and then Gus will stick them a week later. So I can relate. I feel you.
Yeah,
I feel your pain there.
Yeah, between that one and then my kid, I've got a 50 in Canada, but between that one and then my kid catching his first 50 were the two best ones in my boat. So, and he caught his first 50 in Canada too. So on the same day that Trevor Jeremy's boy got a 50 too. They both caught their first 50 inchers on the same day.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my big fish story. I've got a 50 incher, but everybody has that. So mine wasn't a cool story. I just caught it.
I mean, hey,
yeah.
I'm yet to get there. So maybe that'll change. Maybe I'll get a 50 out of the changer in the PMCC. And,
maybe. Yeah.
Have some heads roll.
There you go. That's some confidence right there.
Highly doubtful.
You get a free replica if you did. Rick
my
Lax
God.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too. A couple of the sponsors we got for that tournament. Yeah, we got Stealth Tackle just sent us a whole pile of leaders and fluorocarbon leaders, steel leaders, boat towels, neck gaiters, all kinds of stuff. They just sent us a whole stuff to give away for the tournament. Lake X is going to donate a whole box of B-52s and some top waters and stuff like that for us to give away.
Nice.
Wreck and Rack gave us 2 boards to raffle off on either Friday night or Saturday night, and the 2 boards to use as like if somebody breaks one or somebody leaves their house and forgets it, or whatever, we get 2 extras just to loan out for the weekend. And then we got Sweetwater's gonna do the bar on the bar and restaurant there on Duck Lake on the Eagle River chain is going to do dock delivery for your food, so you can call in during the tournament and get food delivered to the dock to pick it up. So you don't have to get off your boat. Yeah.
Nice. That's sweet.
Yeah, and then they got Eagle Lanes is hosting everything on Friday and Saturday. And I mean, if you've been here, Eagle Lanes has good pizza, all good food and all that.
Great pizza.
Yeah, and then Rick Lax is going to donate a free replica for the biggest fish up to 48 inches in the tournament. And then if you already have a mount, like if the biggest fish in the tournament turns out to be like a 41 incher and you don't want it mounted, or you don't want a replica of it, he's going to give you a gift certificate towards a future mount for that amount.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
So that's some of our sponsors right now. So going good so far.
Yeah, those are awesome sponsors. I'm excited. I kind of was joking about the 50, but that would be awesome to see some big fish come out of the chain during that tournament. It would be good to see.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I still think the biggest fish we've ever seen on the chain was the fish that our other co-host raised, and he's not here to defend himself, but I'm pretty sure his bait was out of the water with about 4 feet left to go and was retrieved towards the end of a weekend. And fish was so hot it came out of the water to try to eat the bait, and he did everything he could to not catch the fish. We still give him shit about it to this day.
Yeah.
That was tough to watch. I was standing about 2 feet from Brian when that happened.
Yeah, it happens.
Oh, absolutely, no doubt. No doubt. And he had one question for you, and not to rag on him too much, but I'm pretty sure he's wondering this because he needs some help and doesn't really listen to Gus too often. But he said, out of all the baits you have in your shop or your boat, what are your 3 go-to baits to throw in Vilas County area?
Ooh, that's a good one. Then I always have a fat bastard, and I always have a bucktail. Usually it's nothing against any of the other bucktails, but it's usually like one that I make here. It seems like every year we kind of get on a color pattern on bucktails, and being that I can make everything I want here, I can kind of make whatever color I feel like is working best for me, And then I usually have some sort of rubber, like a Red October tube or a Medusa or a Bulldog, something like that. If I had to pick, the rubber's tough to pick, but I definitely always have a top water and a bucktail. But those would be, yeah. I don't think I ever only have 3 baits in the boat though.
Yeah, none of us do.
Neither does, I was gonna say, neither does any other musky fisherman.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, going back to the fish stories, I think we have an interesting question here. Is that owning a bait shop, you get a ton of people in, day out. Do you, by chance, have a story on the top of your head about somebody coming in and talking about either just some mythical giant 65-inch muskie or, yeah?
Yeah, I got
We'd
a
love to
real
hear.
good one. It happened last summer. I think I might have even told you about it.
Is this
or
the one about the top water?
If I didn't tell you, Barbara did. A guy came in here last summer and said he needed the biggest muskie bait that we had. And I was like, all right, and we had some, like husky Medusas and some pounders and some other big stuff, and I handed him a Frankensuic and some bigger stuff, and he says, yeah, none of this shit's gonna work. And he's dead serious too, like totally dead serious. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, the muskie that I just saw ate an entire full-grown goose in one bite. Yeah, one bite. Yeah, ate a whole goose, a full-sized goose in one bite. Yeah. And none of those baits would have satisfied that thing's hunger. So we didn't have anything big enough, so I didn't buy anything.
That's insane.
That fish won't eat for another week or 2.
Yeah, that's what I told him. That's going to take a while for that thing to digest a whole goose. But
well, I just want to do my due diligence here. I mean, when he walked out of the store, was he staggering or did he reek a pot or anything? Or
no,
man,
he came in. I know. I mean, I was looking for all the signs too, but he came in. He did not. No, hey, he was stone faced, dead serious.
Looked like he just saw a ghost. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Holy crap!
Wow. Yeah, that was one of the better ones I've heard. I hear all the other ones, like, oh, its head was on this side and my back was getting wet on the other side of the boat because its tail was there. I've heard all that. Those good stories before, but the full grown goose was a good one. And we had no baits in the store that were big enough for that fish. So
that's unreal. The guy's out at his truck, like stapling bulldogs together to try to make something big enough to. Yeah. So what is I guess not talking miss then? What is some of the bigger fish you've heard coming out of the Vilas, Oneida County, just from people popping in? Have you heard 50s being caught?
Yeah, like every now and then, not a lot. My brother has he could catch a 50 anywhere that he goes, but he's got, I believe, 3 now, 3 over 50 in Vilas County. I don't have any, but he's got 3 legit fish over 50 now, including that one real big one. I mean, and he got 2 of them I think it was just last year. 2 of his 50s were just last year, so. Yeah, they're up here, but you got to work for them. And I know another guy that does a lot. He kind of really only does fall trolling, and he got a 52.5 last year, and then one that was 50 and a quarter or something like that, 50.5 right there. But that 52.5 was a big one. But he all of his are trolling. But makes sense. And then you hear about them still, just not a ton of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to tangle in with the Northwoods 50-incher. Like Max said, I also have not tangled with one yet, but soon will be the day, I hope.
Yeah, just go to Canada.
Or Minnesota.
Yeah, or Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah,
So
true.
those are all great stories. And I think before we leave you, Justin, we got one last question. And that is, with being a bait shop owner, what are some of the difficulties with that?
I never get to go fishing anymore.
Ah,
Not as much as I want, anyway. I purposely fish Tuesday night league because I have to go fishing then. So
there you
I
go.
got to pick one or the other. I don't. We sponsor a team for Monday night league, so I usually don't fish in Monday night, and then we sponsor a team for Tuesday night. And since my brother runs Tuesday night league, I fish that one with my kid, and so at least that way I get out at least once a week. But that's the worst part of having it is when you work. I also work another job, and Ashley works another job. And we have Tom and Louie here once in a while to help out on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but as far as going out like on weekends and stuff like that to go fishing and that, I don't get a lot of time for that anymore. But hopefully that'll change eventually when we get, every year we're trying to get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So once we get big enough to sustain someone else being here all the time, then hopefully I'll get to roll out a little bit.
Sure. Well, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. We're really new to this whole not only podcasting thing, but I don't think I've ever interviewed a person like this before. So thanks for being the first guy to hop on. It was really fun. And hopefully we'll have you back on maybe before or after the tournament just to do a little recap and how it all went and stuff like that would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And if, like I said, if anybody needs, anybody watches this and wants to get an entry form, either call the shop or shoot me or the shop a private message on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll get you one right away.
awesome.
Sounds good.
Love to hear it. Well, thank you, Justin, for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for
having
having
me.
me.
Of course. And you have yourself a good night.
Thanks, guys. You too.
All right, let's get into some Q&A this week. We got a bunch of good questions in from our listeners from a poll that I put up on Instagram. So let's just get the ball rolling. Our first one comes from listener Ben.Seidel9. He's asking, if a guy was planning a long weekend trip to Vilas County, middle of June, what patterns? All right, well, Ben, middle of June is still a pretty high transition period, and you could really be faced with some different conditions really based on what lake you choose. And luckily for you, Vilas County, you got a whole bunch of lakes to choose. And pretty much right off the bat, I would immediately recommend going to some smaller lakes because by then those weeds are going to be developed really nicely. A lot of that cabbage is just going to come up super green, and you're for sure going to find fish in shallow. And that's just a great time of year to go hit some weed edges and definitely switch it up. I mean, 100% roll with some single blades. Definitely keep some small rubber in the box and don't be afraid to throw out a mag dog here and there. But if I were in the boat right then and there, I'd be just throwing probably a 7-inch slammer, a giant killer, or a reg dog. Those would be 3 lures that I just bring out right off the bat to go fish those smaller lakes with really good weed growth. And then if you are a little more set in stone on a lake that might be larger, clearer, those weeds are definitely going to be coming up. They're going to be starting for sure by then. And this could even be the case for some of the smaller stain lakes. There might be a bug hatch that happens starting around then. And you definitely want to be aware of that because that could really ruin a shallow water pattern pretty quickly and make finding fish really difficult. And a lot of times the fish that really want to eat are going to be the ones that might be, you got your backs to them the whole time. So that is a good time of year to just do the classic 1-2 casts out from where you normally go. And I think that's really worth a shot. And that's something I think we touched on last week a little bit with one of our listeners' questions about open water, that you really just gotta, it can be tough at first, but you really just have to find that breakthrough fish. once you get that one fish to go, all the light bulbs go off in your head, and then you just get all the confidence in the world, and you're set to go. I mean, that's what it's all about to get the next bite in musky fishing is be confident with what you're doing. And if you're not confident, there's, little likelihood of a fish hitting the bag.
I got an answer, but Brian, do you want to go?
Early season, like for your first few weeks, starting an opener, jerk bait with that pole pause killed it last year. And if you don't notice that they're fired up on bucktails and a straight retrieve lure, then that's a good option too.
So I went back through my camera roll because I just wanted to, I guess, appropriately answer the question and just kind of look back at some of the mid-June fish we've caught, kind of go, I guess, just from past experience. So I think a few different things that I saw that you could probably create a pattern from. I don't think any of this is earth-shattering news by any means, but a lot of the mid-June fish that we've caught in the past, especially those like kind of more fired up males in that like 30 to 36 inch range, a lot of them came on small blades, fishing weeds, definitely like the best developed weeds, wherever that is in that system. And for whatever reason, I mean, and I think this happens quite often, but a lot of the fish came either first thing in the morning or lower light conditions towards the evening. Just kind of going back through pictures, a lot of the pictures are either, stamped around that like 7 to 7:30 a.m., 8 a.m., or, closer to sunset. And then I think the few bigger fish that we've caught middle of June, like Gus just said, came from, really just like either open water stuff, trolling in between kind of bites, where we actually did get some fish, some good fish during the middle of the day. One fish particularly comes to mind. I think it was 2 years ago on the chain where, we were casting at some of the good emerging weeds and some of the best developed weeds in the system, really not moving anything. And I don't know if we were changing spots or what we were doing. I mean, it was pretty early on into our trolling, I guess, when we started to troll really. And we stepped off the break, rolled the shoreline that we were casting the weeds, and popped a really nice fish. So, and I think at that time we were either just hand trolling or maybe we had one rod holder.
Possibly. I can't remember.
But so yeah, that kind of showed me that, maybe those fish just move off a little bit, if they're coming off the spawn or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a time when you can still catch some nice fish. It's just kind of figuring out, if they're either off those weeds or they're in those emerging weeds, and then really hit it hard during those low light periods, first thing in the morning and, right before sunset as well.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, some of those fish that we catch first light and first dark on bucktails usually have come on prominent weed points, which if another thing about weed points that can be really good to get early weed growth is that it doesn't matter if it's on the east, west, north, south shoreline, a long extended point out at the tip is going to get the most sunlight no matter what, because it's, more out in the middle of the lake and it's not going to have any trees blocking it from the shoreline. So that's going to get some of the best developed weeds, other than maybe just a very prominent, super large, fast weedy bay. Those are for sure going to get some of the early weed growth as well. So that was a really good question, Ben. So short answer, middle of June, that is a huge transition time. So you got to just be open. I'd say another thing is really be open to not switching spots so much a ton. I mean, covering water is a good thing, but sometimes maybe even just switching a lake. All right, let's go to our second question. And this comes from Mike Z with Sad Boy Muskie Club.
Sad boy.
What up, Sad Boy? All right, he's got a really good question here. He asks, thoughts on raising a giant that doesn't eat? Have you seen them back or vacating the area? This is a good question, Mike. We have definitely seen all three, where you end up seeing them that night and you catch them. You just see them again and you don't, or you see them the next day, or you see them 2 months later and you catch them. So it's hard to say what those fish really do. Sometimes in between there, fish have tails, fins and all that stuff. They're going to move around. Some might do a little more moving than others. But one thing that I have seen with certain big fish is that once you raise it, I definitely wouldn't recommend immediately just casting back every single lure you got in the box. That might just totally ruin your chances, and then that fish will swim away or something like that. You usually want to calmly take your time and probably cast back later. I'd say for sure, usually give them like a 20 to 30 minutes. If it's in like a good moon window, and if it's not in a good moon window and you move that fish, that's usually a decent sign that if that fish is already fired up outside of a window, outside of some sort of feeding window where something's happening and there's a peak, I would for sure wait to come back on that big fish that same day at either sunset or like an afternoon. If you say you move it in the morning, a afternoon / midday major minor, and then the icing on the cake would be one of those minors or majors coinciding with sunset, and that's when you really have to go back to that waypoint. And tips for going back on that fish, it's tough. I mean, downsizing is usually the best bet to do. We have had some success going back with the same exact lure that the fish was originally raised on, because it was raised on that for a reason. And I don't know so much about changing color and keeping the same bait. I'd say maybe changing up maybe your cadence if you're doing a pull pause. And if that fish is really fired up, we've seen them really come blazing in on small blades. Anything that's like a single 8 Colorado. I don't know what size the giant killer is with MEPS, but that's a great cast back lure. Really any of those just size 5, 6, 7, and I guess even 8 single blades are amazing cast back to come back, even if it's a super big fish. So those are my few tips.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think you, if I'm not mistaken, guys, you have a great story of catching a big fish that you raised. Well, you can tell the story. I don't know when you raised it, but I believe you raised it prior to catching it during a tournament.
Yeah, for sure. I'll let Max tell the beginning of the story.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Gus's answer, but I guess I will hammer home the fact that if you do find a big fish in an area, you've done 90% of the work then, because you found out where that fish lives, and there's a good chance, in my opinion, that it's going to stick around, just kind of from some of the experiences we have. Obviously, it's not all the time, but we have a few stories of fish that, we raise weeks and even month prior to then actually catching that fish. I think it might have even been an end of June type day, relative around mid-June, where we were out muskie fishing. It was myself, Gus, and our dad. And my dad caught a pike, was reeling in the pike, and right at the boat, pike shook off, and all of a sudden, just this behemoth of a muskie came up and a million miles an hour T-boned the pike. Like, I mean, the pike disappeared. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Like, it was probably I don't know, 16-inch pike, and it was just gone in a half a second. All three of us just looked at each other like white in the face, like, what the hell was that? And we stuck around that area for a while, casted everything at it, and obviously didn't get it to go again. Fast forward to, I'm not sure the tournament name, but it is the World Championship.
The Championship Muskie Open in August.
And our first morning of the tournament, I was throwing a topwater, shocker. And we were in that exact same spot. I think we had made mention, like, yeah, I mean, we saw that really big fish eat the pike, a while back. Right after we were talking about it, a freaking Mastercraft size wake starts forming behind my topwater. Kind of nipped at the back of it, and we were fishing three deep in a tournament. So Brian and Gus were kind of, entrenched in what they got going on. And it like took a second for me to even register what was happening, but I, could see the wake. I could kind of make out the silhouette of the fish. And I was like, that is that fish that ate that pike back at the end of June. Like, there's no question in my mind, because we're fishing a body of water where, the size of fish that are 44 plus inches are few and far between. And so, I obviously can't confirm it was the same fish, but it was the same waypoint, same spot. And it was just kind of nipping at the back of the bucktail. Never fully grabbed it, but it was, the top water. Never fully grabbed or anything, but, I got their attention. They could Brian and Gus kind of saw what was going on. and we were fishing a tournament. So obviously we were going to go back at that fish. I think that day, you know, the weather was, you know, that typical August, you know, fairly hot, good southwest wind. And then I'll let Gus finish the story because he's the one that ended up sealing the deal. But things drastically changed, but that fish's location did not.
Correct. Yeah. I think the rest of that tournament went with a lot more muggy conditions, and there might have been a storm that was, I think, happened on one of the last nights, I think Saturday night or something like that. And on Sunday morning, we were brought with like a 40-some degree morning, just super cold, tons of mist coming off of the water, and virtually no wind. I mean, I think there's a little bit of wind, and it's starting to pick up from like the northeast or something gnarly like that. And we go back. I don't think we went to that spot immediately in the morning, and I think it might have been our second spot, but we went back there, and for whatever reason, I know we moved it on the top water, and then, you know, in June it ate a pike, so you can't really take much off of that. But I decided to throw on a mid Medusa, and it was in very shallow water. It was in like maybe 4 or 5 feet of some pretty hefty weeds. So I was ripping it about as hard as you can to go through that at 7 some in the morning, and rod stopped, loaded up, and I was just like, oh, got one. This is a big one. You know, it's just staying down, and it's just dead weight coming in, and you know, it's always fun fighting these fish, but in the tournament you really want them in the bag. And luckily Max scooped it in before it could really even do like any crazy thrashing or anything, and we didn't realize how big it was until we looked in the net and we're like, oh, that is a giant, you know, for this body of water. That is a very large fish. And yeah, that's the story of catching one, you know, 2 months later.
I got one more quick story, not to belabor the question too hard, but it's a good question, and you know, I'm also very intrigued by it because obviously, you know, the goal of musky fishing, I guess one of the goals of musky fishing is to catch big fish, right? So you kind of want to know what their habits are. I feel like they're almost a separate class of fish from like a typical, you know, smaller muskie. But there was another body of water last year that we just started fishing. And the first time we were there, I was throwing my trusty 8-inch Navin in this really thick weed bed that was probably, I mean, kitchen table is an understatement, but maybe a handful of kitchen tables connected together, you know, and so anyways, I'm popping it through this pretty thick weed bed. It's fairly clear water. And so, you know, as I pulled this, you know,
We still don't know.
Still don't know exactly how big this fish is.
I think I've hooked and lost it now.
But it had this very distinct, very orange top fin. So it kind of had that marking where it's like, okay, it looks a little different than most fish, you know, in that system. And anyways, it swiped at the navel and completely missed because I pulled it right out of its mouth. And it was, again, it was a giant fish. And you know, we didn't get it to move again that day. My dad and brother went back, I think 3-4 days later.
I think the second time we went back on it was that one morning in Topwater, and it followed you in.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
the next time.
Right, yeah. Anyways, we had this fish up a bunch throughout a handful of different weeks. We still have not caught this fish, and I will be very curious this year if we can go back and fish that exact same section and move it. We know what the fish looks like because it has that very distinguishable fin. I mean, I think on the last pod you talked about catching that fish on the flaptail brine that morning. I mean, it was the same, you know, same thing where a few casts later we moved that same fish in the same area, same weed bed on Topwater. It just kind of came up and showed that orange fin, and then, you know, we didn't see it for the rest of the year. So yeah, it's a great question. I'd be very curious to know exactly how those big fish do, if they just dominate an area and they just stay there once they get to a certain size, or if they do, you know, continuously hit different areas, different weed beds, stuff like that. It's a $1 million question, no doubt.
And before we leave this question, I'd say, sad boy, if you move a big fish, just visit that area often and hit that area hard, because not only are you going after that big fish and getting the chance at catching that big fish, usually it's just a solid area, and we've caught multiple fish off of waypoints of really big fish that are, and obviously not the same size class, but it just means that it's a really good area. So
Yeah, I mean, big fish aren't dumb, so there's a reason why it's using that, pocket or that, break line or what have you. So yeah, appreciate you writing in, sad boy.
got another question in on Instagram, and that comes from the user Poorly Made Musky Memes, which has an awesome account. Love following you. You make some great content. I haven't heard of his page. I highly recommend following Poorly Made Musky Memes. So he asks, what 4 lures should every musky angler own? How many color variations of these?
Got to start with Brian here.
He's handing
Fired
out
up.
these right
This-
now. Let's hear it.
That's a big
Or-
question. So 4
kinda
baits
is.
and then colors.
Yeah, I mean, you can keep it as
We'll get a true peek behind the curtain here on what goes on with the monkey hitting the cymbal in Brian's head most of the time.
doing backflips. And hey, Brian, you with
I
us?
am notorious for switching baits every 3 to 5 minutes, so I've definitely had my experiences with them all. But yeah, to answer your question, top 4 baits. If I had to only have 4 in the box, I think you have to start with a bulldog, probably a reg dog. I don't know if this is outside the rules, but I would group that with a regular Medusa, one or the other. Then you gotta have I'd probably go 500 Booker tail or some of that nature, musky killer, just your standard bucktail, nothing too crazy and loud. I've had some good success in the musky killer. You gotta have a topwater. You can use it all year round. I would go with a flap tail. Seems to be the most productive for us, at least. And then to wrap out my 4, hope I'm not missing something, I would go with a double joiner Fleet Farm Custom. This bait is a spring killer. You can pause that thing between those new weeds. And it's even great in the fall too when you're trying to have a slower presentation. Color wise is pretty easy for me. Pretty much whatever looks cool to you on the shelf, the fish are gonna think's cool. I like a bright lure, especially in that dirty water. So yeah, that sums it up on my end.
Just orange, Brian? Is that what you like?
Orange, chartreuse. You can throw green in there, red in there. I mean, I don't think any color is bad. The more the merrier.
All right. It's a great question. And I think it's hard because it changes year by year for me. But 2023 Max would say you need a crane bait in your tackle box for crankbaits. You can get your
Did you
hands
say
on
crane
one.
bait or crankbait?
Crane bait. Crane
bait.
bait. What is it? The 20.
I don't really know his models super well. 207, and then they make like a 3 something,
Yeah.
kind of like different shapes and
Experts here.
yeah,
I
100%.
definitely would say any variation of a crane bait that rises because you can use it in so many different areas. Especially if you're fishing weeds, it's a great bait to kind of work through weeds because it does rise so quickly. So it's pretty easy. It's super workable. It moves fish. It catches fish. Color wise for the crane bait, I would keep it pretty simple. I mean, I don't think there's too many options in general. Either go if you're fishing a clearer body of water, go something more natural. If you're fishing a stained body of water, maybe try to see if there's a little bit more sparkle or a color variation. So that would be 1. 2 would be for me, some sort of a staggered bucktail. I think when those kind of hit the scene, they were hot for a reason. I mean, musky for whatever, they just like them. So some sort of 8-9 stagger. Bucktails for me, I like bucktails that are pretty traditional in color. I think a lot of times with bucktails, I mean, obviously color, I think might play a factor in them, but I think it's more so retrieve speed, stuff like that. Yeah, I would probably try to keep it darker color for bucktail. I will say if you're fishing stained water, we've had really good success with tinsel bucktails. So if you can find, something like that, or even have Gus maybe draw you up one. He likes to tie his own bucktails. So I'd probably go that for my bucktail. My third would obviously be some sort of rubber I'm a bigger fan of Medusas than Bulldogs. Hot take. I've had more success on them. So I'd probably go, a mid Medusa size. I think it's the easiest to work and it's the most versatile. You can add a weight to it to get it down deeper. You can still throw mid Medusas and weed beds, stuff like that, as long as you have the right, reel and rod. And I would say, having a top water is great. I obviously love to fish them, but I think for the fourth bait, I would stay in the rubber category and say get a tube. Because for whatever reason, like you can have a Medusa bite one day and a tube bite the next day. And I think to have a little bit of variation in your rubber game is good. But yeah, those 7.5 inch Ninja tubes are awesome. I guess color too with the tubes, something just standard. If you want to add a blade on the back, that's great. But yeah, either a dark green, black, those colored tubes have done really well for us. Mid Medusas, we've done great on that perch color. I think it's
Hot perch.
hot perch is the color pattern that we've done really well on. There's like a brown carp color pattern that we've done really well on. I think it might be called.
I'm not sure that color, but it's like a white underbelly and just like a copper brown top.
Yeah, copper brown top, white underbelly. We've done well on that one. And then the old ball buster, that's a great color that we've stuck some good fish on. So that'd probably be my 4 baits.
I think for my 4 baits, I got to start this off with the 10-inch Suick weighted thriller. That's just an overall solid lure to pretty much use year round. And not most, but all of my fishing, if I am fishing during any trip, is going to be from the back of the boat. And more times than not, you usually start the front of the boat with something a little bit quicker, whether that be a bucktail or fast ripping rubber. And I like to kind of round it out of the back with a Suick, and those things they just seem to move fish when they're not biting anything else as well, and they're gonna get some bites. And if you're working a Suick and you're getting follows, it's either because you're probably working it too slow or methodically, or at that time it's a good idea to just get out either a fast bucktail or rip rubber as fast as you can, and that's usually a good cast back on all the moved fish by Suicks. So that's my first bait, and that's probably my all-time favorite bait of the 4. I think my next lure is gonna be, I was gonna say like an 8-9 stagger from Musky Frenzy. Max already said it. It's definitely one of my favorites. I love staggers too. The trigger from Mayhem is just incredible as well. But I'm gonna have to go with the Giant Killer from Meps. Just that single willow blade seems to be super deadly and get a little bit deeper, and just the tiny little bucktail skirt on the hook just seems to be a great downsizer for really any time of the year. It's awesome opener to August, really. So that would be my number 2 bait. For my last 2, let me think. I know Max said crane bait for crank. I also have to go with a crankbait because I do love throwing crankbaits, and that's going to be. I'm torn.
Slammer.
I am doing a slammer, but I'm torn between a 5 or a 7. I'll just go 7. I think I throw that more. I mean, 5 is just an incredible downsizer, cast back, just getting fish to move when really nothing else is. But I'm going to go with the 7 because right out of the box, that thing, you can kind of work it as just a straight retrieve. You can do a pull pause. You can really slackline twitch it and almost get it to work like a glide bait in the first couple twitches. And that thing will really, just like a Suick, it just get fish to get aggressive and attack it and maybe move fish. And it's just a solid lure that I know a lot of people throw crankbaits or throw slammers, but people say it and I'm out there and I really don't see people fishing crankbaits. It's just crazy. But I definitely think a slammer is going to be one of my 4. And to round it out, I know Max did 2 rubbers and the last one he stole mine. And, I know, Brian, you've said Reg Dog already, and that's one of my favorites, but I do have to go tube. That thing it's too deadly. You can work it slower and you can work it faster. I mean, my favorite tube is the midweight Ninja tube. and I'll throw that thing in shallow water. Don't care. I'll just rip it as fast as you can, and that thing's really going to get some big time reaction strikes. And when you're doing that, you got to have an extra heavy rod at least to get the power to be able to rip it over some shallow structure, and just for the hook sets. Because when they hit tubes, they hit them hard. And like Max said, I typically use a blade in the back, but you really don't always have to. I know it's a little more standard now, and it all just depends on the day. I got tubes rigged up with and without blades, the 10-inch and 7.5-inch. But day in and day out, my favorite is the 7.5-inch. And
I feel like you're almost being more unique when you don't use a blade these days. I feel like
Might be.
everybody's using a blade.
yeah. Oh, and I didn't even touch on color at all. Man, I'm boring with color, I swear. I think this favorite slammer is pretty much black, and favorites Suic is their color that they've probably been doing since inception, and I think it's called Sucker, where it's a white belly, yellow side, and black top. For Muskie, for the Giant Killer, that one really depends. For the most part, it kind of divvy up between either a gold or a silver blade, just based on usually water color and just the day, and it's good to switch it up. But orange and chartreuse, those are really solid colors. Tube, I think Max touched on like green and blacks, but those are very solid as well. But I like the ugliest tube you can buy. That's the one that's gonna get bit. All right, let's move on to our next question. This comes from Grace Wood. Fave baits for early summer fishing. God, more bait talk.
Yeah, it's really a tell-all tonight. You know, we've had a few beers. We're giving away our favorite lures, favorite colors. Appreciate the question. That's my girlfriend writing in. She spent many hours out on the musky boat with us, so she knows what she's talking about. You know, I think one for her, because it's actually one of her favorite baits. I actually think she refers to them as squishy boys, and that's the is it the mini Medusa? Is that the one that you caught that nice fish
Yeah.
on last year, early summer?
Yeah, mini.
Yeah, mini Medusa. I think that's a very underutilized bait for early season. I know we kind of brushed over that with some of the June fishing talk and whatnot, but yeah, that downsize and rubber. You know, we got a nice fish on that last year and seemed to move a few other fish on it as well. So I would say that one. I know you guys probably have your own opinions, so I don't want to kind of go on to my other ones, but yeah, the small squishy boys, as Grace calls them.
I think in early summer is kind of like a good time. I mean, I don't know what I'd consider really. I'm trying to think of like early summer. I mean, that's kind of when you kind of get past the opener and spawn and stuff. And for blades wise, that's kind of the time where it starts switching to stagers in the 7, 8, 9 category and double eights a little bit. So those would be very good early summer baits.
And I will just add real quick, I guess, to off my answer. I mean, really at that time, you know, day conditions and whatnot, I mean, you can start to really upsize those rubber baits as well. I mean, especially if you get those like really chewy afternoons where you get some like big clouds forming and feels like that kind of like late afternoon bite window opens up. That's like my favorite time during the summer, like when you start getting those kind of hot, muggy days to start throwing, you know, obviously things that are larger than the mini Medusas. So yeah, I guess that I just wanted to expand a little bit on my answer.
So Brian, what would you pick for early summer fave bait? Maybe talk about a bait that you haven't talked about yet tonight, just to give the listeners a new one.
Yeah, I guess I don't think we mentioned this one. I think maybe we did in an earlier pod, but I guess the first 3 weeks of the year, like I said earlier, crankbaits or jerkbaits, I love working them, but specifically the Ridgeway crankbaits, Ridgeway Customs. I know, Gus, you just got the first one this year. Use it a little bit in our Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but those have great action. And yeah, I think being able to twitch that in between the little patchy spring weeds here in a couple weeks, that's probably going to be our ticket. At least that's what it was last year. So hopefully the muskies are still interested in eating those.
Yeah, I'm excited to throw that Ridgeway. Had a really good time chatting with Matt Ridgeway at the Wausau show, and got a 9-inch Ridgeway custom from him, and don't really have too many. I mean, the crankbaits that we have in that category of size are typically just used for trolling, but this one he makes for casting specifically. So I'm really excited to throw that as like a change up from throwing big rubber, because that seems like what he likes to do with them. So, and I know I'd still love to throw Medusa's dogs and tubes and all that stuff, but I'm excited to throw that.
Brian, I can't believe we've gone this far talking about early season fishing and you haven't talked about a spinnerbait yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that would slip my mind, but that's usually something I go to later on in the day as I've already picked through 20 other baits, and then spinnerbait will come to my mind, and it honestly seems to produce, you know, some different action for muskies than the typical single blade bucktail. So I don't know. I think it's a good change up. If it is a bucktail bite, I feel like, somebody in the boat's got to also be throwing a spinnerbait too.
All right, let's move on to our next one, and we got a question from this guy last week. This comes from Woodsy on Instagram.
What's Beauty Rick?
Woods Beauty Rick is back, and he asked a doozy here. He asked the thoughts on Ohio fishing tournaments cheating scandal, which I think he's referring to
The wall.
weights and fish.
Oh,
Who's got
yeah.
weights and fish?
Get him out of here.
Which is an absolute all-time video. I don't believe that's happened in the muskie world, but he says, ever seen cheating in tourneys? I think when it comes to money, cheating is inevitable. There's gonna be somebody out there that loves to do it. I mean, Max, you and I saw it, and Brian, all of us firsthand fishing, or not fishing, sorry, golfing in like high school with some random guys, and you kind of got to start counting their strokes because you're like, you didn't.
That wasn't a 5.
Yeah, my guy, you didn't get a bogey after hitting in the woods 3 times. But I mean, like I said, I don't think anything as crazy as the walleye scandals happened, but I think they're doing a great job, and they're really cracking down on it. Is the new one this year on making sure that there's no flipping on fish, and that's making sure that when the fish is bumped on the bump board and you take that first picture of your first fish in the tournament, if you catch more fish than that, they all have to be bumped in the same direction, which means if you say you have a bump board that is considered a right-handed, where typically you hold the fish in the underneath the gill with your right hand, you place it on the bump board, you're looking at the bump board, and the fish's nose to your right, the back is up against the little back plate, and you're pinching the tail with your left hand. This doesn't mean you can go on that bump board and just basically have the fish on the other side and take a picture and then hold the fish on the other side and then call it a different fish without pinching the tail or something like that. So I really think this is a good rule. I just hate to think that there's really cheaters out there, but like I said, man, when there's money involved, people will do anything, especially if they start getting away with it, like those Ohio guys, those walleye fishermen. I mean, who knows how long they've been doing it for, and that before they got caught, they just got greedy.
Yeah, I mean, that was unfortunate to see, but the freaking cojones on those guys to start stuffing walleye fillets and leads in those walleyes' belly. I mean, that's
surprised
just
it wasn't more
insane.
obvious. Just glancing.
I mean, yeah,
at
you
him,
got an 18-inch walleye, you got 2 18-inch walleye, and one weighs twice as much as the other
10
one. I mean,
pounds.
you think it would raise some flags at the weigh-in station. I mean, luckily Muskies is for every tournament, I mean, that I've ever seen, it's a length, the way you judge the fish is on length. And so it's pretty hard to, stretch a fish out if you got the full picture from the tip of it all the way to the tail. And I'd like to think the best of the muskie community. I mean, I think it's, I'm sure the guys that have fished in tournaments for a long time probably have some better stories about this. I mean, we're relatively new, and I think with technology and stuff these days, it's pretty easy to kind of confirm on where pictures were taken, when pictures were taken, stuff like that. So I'd like to think that now there's at least probably minimal to none in muskie tournaments. I mean, not that I've given it much thought, but I just feel like after fishing tournaments last few years, like it would be so tough to do it that it's just not. It's obvious it's never worth it, but and it also is just like the whole point of muskie fishing and tournaments and stuff is like to become a better angler, catch awesome fish. I mean, the cheating part would just completely take all that out of it. So I guess I'd like to think the best of the muskie community. I think, tournaments are run really well and we don't see it too much in those, but if it does happen, or if you guys have had any stories, any of the listeners that are tuning in here tonight, that if they've ever seen stuff or I guess tournament, have any stories that'd be funny to share. Maybe they've already been rectified or passed, so they can air it out. We'd love to hear. I mean, I'd love to hear it because I think that stuff's hilarious. So
I would too.
yeah, I'd be very curious to know if anyone has any stories from our listening base.
Now we got our second to last question for the night, and this comes from the last one from Instagram, and that is Spencer Eaton. He asks, how do you choose what color lure to use when not using an imitation bait? I think when he says imitation, do you think he's talking about something that's more mimicking a real fish, maybe like a crankbait or maybe like one of those swim baits,
Sucker.
like like a Susie sucker, the Savage Gear sucker? Because natural patterns work all the time, but when picking a different colored lure, I mean, it's hard to say. Do you put all black in the natural pattern category?
I mean,
Yeah.
I've never seen a completely black fish before, but I guess
That's all the fish see.
Fair enough. All right, well then I'm gonna dive right into that because the color black on a lure is just awesome, and I'd say as soon as those lakes get bloomed up, that's the time when you're choosing a color and doesn't have black in it, you're probably missing out on some fish because you're creating some big silhouettes in the water.
I really want to hear Brian's answer on this. Anything color related, I need to hear what Brian's thoughts are.
I think I'm done. So yeah, Brian, take it away.
Okay. So yeah, I've been infamously known to throw the brightest things in the box. Usually I kind of tend to go to that pattern when we're struggling to move many fish, but I don't know. I guess I would say for me, if the water is kind of stained like coffee and the sun's out, a lot of times that bright orange will have a big reflection, or a white bait with kind of like a silver side on it will reflect and push those sun waves down in different directions through the water, and it gives me confidence that the fish are gonna be able to see it from farther away. I mean, in clear water, I mean, it's sort of the same thing. You're not going to have, I don't think, as much of that kind of glowing of the bait if it's a bright color. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's just getting these fish to see the bait, especially if it's, not a bucktail and they're not necessarily going off of the vibrations and sound as much. But yeah, I mean, I it's a confidence for me, just so I know that if it's anywhere near them, they're gonna be able to see it. If they can see color, I don't know. The word's still out on that yet.
Yeah. True. I actually think I know we talked about him last podcast, but I think Tom from the Muskie Hunks is doing some stuff with muskie and color, and I don't know. I guess I've kind of lightly seen that on his Instagram.
If the study comes out that color does not play a part, it's going to kind of ruin the sport for me.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, retire at that point. All right, I guess okay. My answer is going to be completely just off of personal bias. But I guess I'll just kind of go off of that. So I would say anything that has a bloom. So if the water's bloomed and it's kind of that like pea soup green color, I love black baits. If it's stained, kind of flowagey, brownish, tannic water, love browns, which seems a little bit counterintuitive, but it's done well for us. I know Brian's shaking his head here. Browns, yellows, and oranges have done really well for us. And then anything with clear water, whites have always done well in some capacity. So I'd say, if you're kind of breaking it down by those three classes of water, those would be the colors I'd go to. I'd naturally kind of gravitate towards. So yeah, that would be my answer.
Yeah, and another thing to touch on there, I didn't talk too much on this question, but if you're picking something other than natural, I mean, there's usually a reason why somebody pretty much for the Northwoods is always like, if you got one color to pick, why would you choose it? And 9 times out of 10, it's either going to be perch or fire tiger. And typically with the perch and fire tiger, you got some pretty high contrasting colors where you might have an orange belly, some sort of gold or chartreuse side, and then you have black bars or black or bronze or brown bars. And a good thing, even if it's not natural colors, if you get anything with bars on it, it's really good to have contrasting colors, and I think that's definitely important to have. And our final question comes from our father, and he asks, "What do you think about the later ice out, and how do you think that's going to affect the lakes going into opener?" Well, that is a great and relevant question, as I believe we're 12 days right now from recording to opening day, and
Let's go.
having yeah, I know
We're
we're all
fired
pumped.
up.
You know, looking back when the ice was still in the lakes in very late April, it wasn't looking great. And as soon as that ice came off, even if it was like a few days later than normal, or maybe a week or so, it's kind of heated up here. We've seen lots of sun, decent bit of wind. Some of the days there was a week where it was very calm, and it's really raised the water temps of the lakes. And we've already gotten some reports of some spawning fish in some of the area lakes. And with this much time before the opener, I'd say that's pretty good. Looking in the forecast, we're going to get a little bit of rain, a little bit of cool downs, a couple nights in the 30s. That might put a little damper on things, and that's just classic spring right there. Ups and downs and ups and downs. And, it might make it tough. There's definitely a possibility where you're going to get onto a lake and there might be spawning fish, and it's usually calling for a tougher bite, because if you got spawning fish, typically while they're spawning, they're not going to go and attack a lure because they're paired up and they're pretty much inaccessible, and that kind of leaves a lot less fish to go after. I don't know how much the late ice is exactly going to affect too much of the spawn and where you're going to be catching fish for the most part in opener, but it might affect the weed growth, and that seems to differ heavily year after year. And that's another thing. Sometimes your old waypoints on weed bends are going to be good and bad and in between, but you might have to kind of relook at the weed growth happening in your lake, because if you do go off of old waypoints and the weed growth is different, it might be the difference of moving or catching a fish as opposed to just seeing nothing. And with the heavy snow cover this year, there could be some difficulties on weed growth, but as always, nature could just totally change and we could get some awesome sunlight, and somehow some lakes just get awesome weed growth or something like that. So only time will tell on that. And overall, I'm just looking forward to opener, and I think it's going to be a great one. And I think things are lining up nicely in the Northwoods.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get a pretty good idea heading into opener with Gus being up here full time now. He'll be out on the water most days, so that'll be really nice to kind of get a live look in on what the stages on where some lakes are at. I know we'll do a full kind of rundown on what our opener plan is next week, which is awesome to think about, that we're one podcast away from talking about actual muskie fishing in northern Wisconsin. And I guess real quick, not to get sidetracked, but we didn't touch on what we're doing for opener, but it's gonna be pretty fun. So we got me, Gus, Brian, and our buddy Jack,
and potentially our other buddy Mitch.
And I think we're gonna do a little bit of a tournament or some sort of competition that we haven't really hashed out the rules on yet, but yeah, we'll probably have that figured out for our podcast next week, but that'll be really fun. So we'll have a lot of lines in the water for opener. We're going to be hitting a bunch of different lakes. So I guess to answer that question on how it's going to affect opener, we'll find out.
We'll find out real quick.
On how it goes. So yeah. But yeah, really looking forward to that. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. I mean, the biggest thing, regardless of what the weather is leading up to opener, is finding the warmest water in the lake or the whatever system you're fishing. Even if it's just like a 2-degree swing, we always seem to find active fish wherever the warmest water is. But yeah, looking forward to getting out on opener with a bunch of guys up there and putting a beat down on who's ever on the opposition. I think right now Max and I'll be teaming up and going against the guide himself. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, that'll be a nice preview into what our tournament experience is going to be like too. So we'll see how the dynamic works. Maybe a little bickering back and forth, but I think it's gonna just sharpen the quill. I think it's just gonna make us on the top of our game. I mean, I think enough offhanded comments from you throughout the day. I think it's just gonna get me fired up and why?
Probably me a little annoyed.
Yeah, probably go. I mean, I think anyone listening to this that fishes with 2 or 3 buddies, through the course of a 10 or 12-hour day can relate to this 15 hour
or an entire 3-day weekend.
Entire 3-day weekend
with the same truck.
Yeah. Oh God, we got some good stories on that. Maybe we'll ever get to those from the
years ago.
Start of our musky addiction type trips we used to go on, but it's all love, it's all love. But I think everyone knows that like they do these trips for 3-4 days. And I mean, it's just hilarious. Like the banter you have back and forth and kind of like stuff that ends up happening throughout the time, especially in between bite windows when things are slow.
Yeah, I think
the real sidetrack sometimes, but that's part of the adventure. It always adds to the story. I mean, Brian does a lot of things I don't agree with. So it's gonna be pretty funny. It's gonna be a good time.
The funniest stuff that always happens when it's like us 3 or 4 of us out on the boat for a 12-hour day is, we're pretty talkative people, but then, if that fishing isn't hot, I mean, we'll go 45 minutes without a word. And it's just silent. All of a sudden somebody will say something, or hopefully it's a fish that gets us talking again, but that's always hilarious looking back in the film or whatnot, and we're just silent and everybody's down bad.
Well, I mean, when we can cut this if we need to, but I mean, some of the stuff that we start talking about just to kill time just can get real weird on the fishing boat, and
especially if it lines up with a fish catch, and that's what you hear before.
Right. Well, so yeah, what I was getting at when we started filming, it loops on 5 minutes, so like you hear the conversation, roughly 2 minutes leading up to the fish, and like we had a stretch where we would like say something just completely off the rails and be like, well, hope we don't catch a fish here the next few seconds, because we're going to have to edit out about 30 seconds of conversation.
It just clips to the hook set.
Oh, man. Yeah, good stuff.
Well, guys, I think we had a really good podcast again this week, and that was our 3rd episode of Muskies on Tap, and I really hope everyone out there enjoyed this episode as much as we did. We had a really good time tonight, and I'm really excited to roll out the next one. It's going to be talking about opener.
Yeah, we can't thank Justin enough for coming on. First guest, hopefully many more. We already got a few lined up, some really cool ones that we're excited to talk to. I mean, the muskie community is just so awesome. So yeah, we're really excited to see where this goes. I mean, I think we're still shocked at how many people actually have tuned into this. So, I mean, we've said that a few times now, but yeah, can't thank you guys enough. It makes this fun and worth it. It's been a cool start.
Yeah, I'll just quick add. If anybody wants to reach out to us, you can reach me at my socials, and that's Suggs Fishing on Instagram, Suggs Fishing Guide Service on Facebook. You can add me as a friend on Facebook as well. It's just Gus Manty. You can reach my cell phone at 920-264-3816. And for the first time ever, you can find me on the internet at www.suggsfishing.com. And I really hope to hear from you guys, and can't wait for the next one. Say goodnight, boys.
See you, everybody.
Good night, gents. Thank you for listening.